Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining the Hair and Makeup Masterclass. My name is Rhianna Dhillon and I want to give a special thank you to Lancôme for not only being the official beauty party for the BAFTA Film Awards, but also thank you for sponsoring this masterclass because it is fabulous to have you all here, and also to be joined by an amazing panel, who I'd like to welcome on stage right now. We have Sewell, who's here to talk about Bohemian Rhapsody. We have Nadia Stacey for The Favourite, Josh Weston for Stan Ollie, and Greg Cannom and Chris Gallaher for Vice. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me. So we'll open it up to audience questions in a bit, but first of all, we're just going to go through everybody's little taster of everybody's films that they've been nominated for. Congratulations to all of you. It's such a pleasure to have you all joining me on the sofa today. So first of all, the nominations this year, I feel, are quite unusual in that all of them are based on real-life characters, every single one. So where do you sort of start in your research into these characters? Dan, let's start with you with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh gosh, well, luckily, I suppose, there's just tons of stuff out there. I mean, Queen, of course, so documented. Yeah. Looking at their concerts, looking at all the interviews, and you know, and I've said before, quite often makeup start after, you know, the production and costume. So there's often quite a lot of referencing that's already been done. So you sort of just absorb yourself into all of that. But I was very lucky. I had loads of referencing I could look at.
Did you have like a specific idea of where you wanted to start with the look of Freddie? Was there like one particular era that you thought, I need to start there and then can go either way from it?
Well, I knew that the script bookended with Live Aid, so obviously for me that was the most iconic look, so that was the one to go for. Of course, I knew there was going to be lots of wigs, and I quite often will go for an end look, you know, because you already know what the beginning look is, and then you can do your timeline in between, because I had a 15-year timeline with the band members. So yeah, it was the Live Aid look for me. Yeah.
It's a good one. And yeah, so Nadia, kind of same question. Like you, I guess yours is slightly different in that you didn't have so much to go on with The Favourite and Queen Anne.
Yeah, it's also strange because it makes me think, oh yeah, we were doing Real People because we went off piste so much. Yeah, I had to really think then. But yeah, obviously for me it was lots of paintings. We looked at lots of paintings. I visited the palaces and that kind of thing, and just to get a kind of essence of that look. And Yorgos really didn't want to stick to anything too rigidly. Yeah. So, I mean, I've said this so many times, but I felt like we researched that period a lot to make sure that you believe that you're in that world, but then I could be a bit freer with that, really. Yeah. So it was just about getting the silhouettes right, so a lot of those could come from paintings.
And Josh, about you with...
Well, I grew up watching Laurel and Hardy films, so it was a great fun to try and recreate, really. But the casting was fantastic. John C. Reilly was perfect for it. So there's a few compromises there. John's got quite a heavy brow, which he didn't have. But so yeah, there was a few compromises, but overall, it worked really well. And as I say, I've been watching them as a kid. So
well, that's it, because again, there's like this sort of whole wealth of images of, you know, these two incredibly iconic characters. Is that quite daunting when you're coming onto a project, first of all?
Yeah, it's a little daunting, knowing that your character is in makeup, in full prosthetics for every single shot. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a challenge, and it was great fun. And John was great in the makeup. He was looking after it really well. So.
Yeah, he looked absolutely fabulous as well. Greg, Chris, I'd like to bring you both in. First of all, could you just talk about your because you've got two of you talking about Vice. So could you just explain your different roles?
Well, they called me in the very beginning about turning Christian Bale into Cheney, and they wanted Christian Bale, and I was just like, oh my God. And so I said, we have to do a test. So we did a quick test, about 2 weeks. It was rough, but it...
What do you mean test?
Just a quick makeup test to see how far I could take it in that time. And then I work with Chris. I don't have a shop anymore, so I designed it and everything. And then I work with Chris in his shop now, and we did the face casts there and everything. And then we did a quick test, and it was crude, but it was enough to green light the film. They thought it was interesting. And then we started months later in August, and we had like 6 weeks only. I wanted 3 months, of course.
And we made sure to let them know. It's like every time, it's like, okay, you know, we really needed more time to get this going, but here we go. So.
And which is, you know, you have like the sort of whole timeline again of Chaney's life to sort of be showing us on screen. So what is it almost easier when he's older and you can sort of layer on more prosthetics or more makeup, or is it?
It started with they said Christian with a little bit of Chaney, because they didn't think it was going to go full bore. And he had never worn prosthetics before, and he was very leery of them. So we just kept adding and adding. And then when he saw his friend Gary Oldman in the preview came out for Churchill, he went, can't we go fatter with it? And so I thought, oh yeah. And then I did a test about 2 weeks before shooting, the 65, 68 look. And I really liked it, and everybody liked it. And then Christian
That's when it clicked.
No.
Oh, God.
A little less here, and I want to go fatter. And I said, I think it's going to be too fat. And he went, no. Let's try it. And of course, he gets whatever he wants, of course. And so we did a quick test, about 5 days, I think, to Saturday. We put him in it, and he went up to the office and put on the suit and the fat suit and the teeth and the glasses, everything.
Nose plugs.
And walked out, and nose plugs, and walked out, and everybody just died. I mean, I was like, shocked. And I go, you were right. This is perfect. And that's when he was happy. That was the best part, is that he kept, questioning me all through it. But now he was looking in the mirror and smiling, and he was starting to really enjoy it. So, and then we had to work backwards. 21, nobody knew what Chaney looked like, so we had it more like him. Young, and then 35 is when he went to first time to Washington, and that's when I wanted to start him looking towards Chaney more, and then
And the irony was, as we did the makeup and he realized, what it allowed him to do, he was like, God, why'd I put on all this weight? You could have just added it.
Yeah, you could go two methods sometimes, I suppose. What I really love the idea of is how the actors start to immerse themselves in the role when they see themselves in makeup. So can you talk through what that's like to sort of see, for example, sort of Rami Malek disappearing into Freddie, and how you can see that affect him?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Greg said, it's so wonderful when they look at themselves and that they're enjoying their look. I mean, what happened to me is Rami's quite a twitchy person. He moves quite a lot. So putting a prosthetic on him was a bit tricky in the morning. So I used to make him go to sleep. I used to say, you have to go to sleep. So he would shave himself. He's quite dark-haired. And then he would put in his earplugs and he would listen to Queen music and go to sleep and wake up Freddie.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
Which was brilliant. I mean, I would just sort of, wake him a little bit. I'd put the nose on, put all the makeup on, and then I'd wake him a bit and he'd get up like that, and then the wig would go on, and then I'd really start to wake him up, and there was Freddie. That's nice.
It can't always be that easy, though.
Well, I had to with him because, and also because we had the earlier calls, which was great. Then when all the boys started coming in, then of course it got noisy, and then he was awake, and then he wanted to engage, and they were talking and joking, and so.
What about like Steve Coogan? I feel like he's somebody who obviously we know for immersing himself in roles.
He would have probably preferred to do it without any prosthetics. He can just turn it on. So I mean, the first thing he said to me was, don't turn it into a makeup show. So, so it was less is more for Steve. But Yeah, so he just has the chin and his ears on, which Jeremy Woodhead applied. Yeah.
Do you notice how, because I know I talked about this last year, talking about Gary Oldman and, you know, how he came out as Churchill and everybody reacted because they just couldn't almost see Gary in that. So do you have that kind of watching your actors go out and seeing how people react differently to them once they're in character?
Well, for me personally, sometimes, because you spend most of your time looking at the person, you know, not the person who sat in your chair, but the person you've made up. Sometimes the person who sits in my chair in the morning, I don't know them. And then all of a sudden, at a certain point, you go, there you are. Oh. There's the person I look at all day. You know, if you do a big change, I don't know whether you guys feel the same, but, you know, if I'm, you know, and then, of course, you take it all off and there's that stranger again.
Is that a similar experience for you?
Well, obviously these guys did much more of a kind of transforming into into their characters, but for me the biggest one, I guess, was for Nick Holt, because when I first met him to talk to him about playing Harley, he had no idea that what his character would look like. He said, "Oh, well, I know it's a period piece, but so I'd said to Yorgos, have you spoken to Nick about, you know, this is a really flamboyant character?" And he was like, "No, he's an actor and he's in a period film and he'll be okay." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but it's quite a big look."
Yeah.
And then so when I showed him the wig and then we did the makeup test, he was pretty shocked at first and then immediately just kind of fell into it and then was, transformed into this sort of Joker every day, really.
He must have absolutely loved it, because it was sort of such a different look for him from what we've ever seen him do before, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, he really went for it, and it was, you know, it was always more, could we take the wig bigger? And he was always up for any of that. And with the face patches that we used, I'd found that there was a kind of language to them, and they all mean a certain thing. So Nick and I would sit together and figure out what scene it was that day, and so where, you know, how he was feeling that day. So he had this kind of secret language going into his scenes. So, and he loved that. Yeah, he was always pushing it more, and the women used to love it when he came in.
Which other heads of departments do you work most closely with in creating these characters? I imagine it's pretty much everyone, but...
Well, for us, it was it was really Christian. I mean, we worked with him very closely right from the beginning. And you know, hair department head Patty Dehaney, and
Kate Biscoe was the head of makeup. She had they had 150 speaking parts. Mostly famous people, all the presidents and everything they were dealing with, and they did, and Jamie Kellman with Kate did Sam Rockwell's makeup as President Bush, and it was insane. Yeah. And the time we had. But going back to your question about people reacting to it, when we started shooting, I walked in on the set and the director was standing there, Adam McKay, who's very positive just incredibly positive person. But I walked in on the set and he goes, "Cannom, how did you do that?" He goes, "I don't understand how you can do that." And I go, "I don't know." And he goes, "Are you a witch?" Maybe I am. I don't know. I don't know how I do it. You know.
Right, I'd like to get into some of the clips. So I think let's start with Bohemian Rhapsody. So can you tell us a little bit, Jan, about what's happening in the clip that you've chosen?
I don't know which one I chose.
Can you remember? Oh,
I can't remember which one I chose.
Well, I'll tell you
I
what.
gave 3 options.
Let's watch the clip, and then you can tell us what's happening.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, put you on the spot.
We made up all those extras. No, we didn't.
So obviously it's quite self-explanatory, you know, at what point that comes. But can you explain like why that was such a sort of vital scene for this film?
Well, it was day 1 of shooting.
That was day 1?
That was day 1 of shooting. And it was nerve-wracking for everybody. Brian May was there, as was Roger Taylor, so the boys were really nervous, as we all were. They had recreated Wembley, because of course it doesn't look like that anymore. No. So they built it in Bovingdon on the airstrip. We did, over the whole film, have 7,000 extras. I'm not quite sure how many we had on that day. It wasn't quite that much, but it was, I mean, the boys, I just think it was it was great because, again, we were recreating everybody.
Yeah.
Those were the scenes where the boys had their little bondos on because it was the slightly older look for them. And of course, you know, once Rami started singing, once the boys started playing, you can't get into them. So, you know, there are prosthetics on them. You know, he's got the nose. Rami has a wig on because he came off his Mr. Robot show, which meant the sides of his hair was shaved off. And he just couldn't grow it in time. And you know, there was the moustache, which I chose to have a moustache that was knotted on lace as opposed to laid on. And it was just a matter of getting in there and checking. But I think you can, I mean, as soon as they started playing, I think we knew it was going to be good because, you know, you felt quite pumped up about it. And I just think their performances were great. But that was day one.
That's insane. What a way to kind of drop you in the deep end.
And everybody had a wig. Nobody turns up looking like they come out of 1980s at all.
But then how did the, you know, like the real life guys, they were on set, so how did they react to seeing themselves recreated? That must have been quite a lot of pressure for you.
Well, it was, because it was, I mean, Brian was the one who was much more kind of proactive, and he saw Gwilym, and he started moving curls around like that,
really?
you know, which is kind of great because if that's all he had to do, then that was pretty good. And he just had the biggest grin on his face. Roger was a little bit more laid back and was just taking the whole thing in. But no, it was, and we did have quite a few people that used to tour with Queen because, of course, they were advising. And I think they were quite pleased.
Were the teeth something that you were involved in?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had about 20 sets.
Oh my God.
It took a long time to decide on that. Those, you know, that set of teeth. We had loads of, you know, it was about, because the very first time we put in, I got Chris Lyons, who made the teeth, to make me a scaled copy of Freddie Mercury's teeth, but scaled to Rami's face, because Rami's slightly smaller than Freddie. And they were massive. They were absolutely massive. I mean, he had a massive overbite. So we then kept going further back, smaller, millimetre. But I didn't want them to disappear. You know, we could have played really safe. And I didn't want them to disappear, and that was how we all felt. And again, as I say, Rami had a big say on this. He'd been practicing with teeth for a long time, but, you know, he had to sing in those, he had to talk in them, but they were beautifully made, so.
It worked out. Yeah. Right, let's move on to the favourite, and we'll have a look at the clip first, and then...
I can't remember either, so if that's good.
All right, let's have a look.
Thanks.
So what always kind of strikes me about the favourite is just how sort of separate and different and striking each of the sort of three leads, their personalities are. So how did you use makeup to make sure they really kind of stood apart from each other?
I mean, I guess doing a kind of character arc for each of them in the beginning, that each one of them, there's three really strong leads there, and each of them go on quite a journey. So it was kind of easy to follow that because, or to make those changes with hair and makeup, because there is such a change from Emma's, for example. She starts as this kind of naive young girl that turns up at the palace and wants to get a job there, and then throughout the film becomes Rachel Weisz's character. So I could map that out, and you know, there would been certain points that she would have had a maid to do her hair and that kind of thing. So there were changes throughout the film that it was easy to kind of, that was the point to change them. And the same with the Queen, her health declined, so when we could start to add that. And so yeah, it was quite clear from the script how we could do that. But as always, you then throw Yorgos onto that.
Yeah.
And it becomes a different ball game, and whatever you've kind of thought, this would be the obvious route, changes, because maybe not, maybe we do this, or maybe we change the colour, or maybe, you know, so every time we did that, there was always a room to be more creative or to be braver with it. So
well, with the favourite in particular, you know, Yorgos uses particularly interesting angles, doesn't he? Like the fisheye lens and everything. Does that change the way that you sort of approach the makeup, knowing that it's going to be looked at in a slightly different capacity to...
Well, again, and I think, you know, myself and Sandy Powell, costume designer, and Fiona Crombie, production designer, we've all said the same thing for a long time, is that we had no idea what was going on from day one. I mean, I honestly sit here now going, I don't quite know how we did it, but it happened and it's all there, because it really was, you know, you never get inside his mind and you never understand how he's going to do. There's never conversations, even with the actors, of like, this is how the scene's going to be. He doesn't talk through, you know, it's all in here. So there's a kind of element of, you bring it to me and then we'll make a film from what you've brought to me. So, which in some ways is an incredible compliment and also gives you the freedom to really go for it. But in that moment, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, because you think, oh, I know what I could have done. But in that moment, actually, it's quite hard to know quite how far to push that. So things like the fisheye lenses, sometimes we didn't know how much that would be used or what his kind of thought was. Or so a lot of the time, we just had to kind of roll with it and hope for the best. I mean, that scene was when that door first opened that day, and I saw all those backgrounds stood there, and Yorgos just went, it was like, see? And suddenly like, okay, oh, wow, okay, we did it, and it looks great. But yeah, to get to that point, it was like, I didn't know we were getting there.
Because that design of that ballroom scene is, that's really stunning, because it's like the first time you see even like Rachel Weisz's character, who is quite pared back, kind of makeup-wise, for the majority, and then you see this, you know, how it's almost just like piled on. So can you like talk a little bit more about literally the design, the colour palette?
Well, that was really, I mean, through Fiona and Sandy, when we first saw where that ball was going to take place, and lots of things happen in that room with that checkerboard floor, that black and white. So then Sandy's costumes, there was lots of black and white theme that ran through everything. And then we decided that if there was going to be the dancers that all lined up down the sides, that we would do black and white wigs for those. And so there was a definite kind of theme for that. And then with the makeup, it's a ballroom scene, so that would be the one time we could really go for it, particularly with characters like Rachel. But when Rachel first came out, he was more on. And if everything was blended quite beautifully, like you've done it with your thumbs, like he would mess things up. And which at the time I was horrified, thinking, it's gonna. But now I get it, and it all, you know, it all comes together. But yeah,
and there is that one scene in The Favourite where Rachel Weisz says to Olivia Colman, "You look like a badger."
Yeah.
And so then, are you kind of reading that in the script going, God, we have to make it look like a badger now? Or where does that come from?
Well, again, because you just, you know, every day in prep I drove home going, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, but the good thing was it was safety in numbers, because everyone was saying the same. I mean, Sandy Powell has so much experience, and, you know, I thought, oh, I'll ask Sandy what she was like. I don't know what I'm doing or what's going on. So we really were all in the same boat. But the badger thing, it was in the script. It was scripted that, you know, you look like a badger. And I have this notebook that I'm constantly every day like making my lists and scribbling things out. And the badger thing just kept appearing all the time, because it was obviously something that was going, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it is. And so then it just kind of emerged from the black and white of the floor and the black and white of the costumes, and there was black and white stripes. And so then I thought, well, that kind of merges in with the badger stripes. And then I looked at this sort of band across their eyes. And then there was a feeling that the Queen would do her makeup, but not very well. There's a real naivety to her, something quite childish about her. And so it's done quite garishly, quite crude. So, yeah, we got there eventually.
Right, let's move on to Stan and Ollie. Let's have a look at a clip from that. So there are quite a few layers to Stan and Ollie, because we see them there performing on stage, so they presumably have sort of more makeup on because they're on stage, but we also see them in the everyday. So can you talk about the layering?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're always very pale in their films, so. And when they're on stage, we just give them a very light coating of RCMA just to pale them down, really, and a little bit of rouge. And that was it, really. We didn't want to go too heavy solely just because we didn't want to destroy the prosthetic. Yeah. Because sometimes we'd have to go back to keep them clean. So, yeah, it was very light dry brush, really, of RCMA. But, yeah, it's just with that, because they were on stage, literally performing that, getting really hot, his huge fat suit on. Although it's a cool suit, and he'd come off usually each take, and we'd plug him in, and it'd cool him right down again.
Is that really what?
Oh yeah, you go off stage, battery-powered cool suit, yeah.
That's amazing.
Pump cold water.
I didn't know those existed.
Oh yeah.
That's
For racing drivers, yeah. No, it was great. It saved our lives, really, and he's really good at maintaining the makeup, because he's also got his hands on as well.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the fat hands.
Yeah,
Yes.
his backs of hands, appliances, and they were all very playing with their hands all the time.
Yeah.
So that had to be, glued on quite precise.
So was that a sort of different material? Because it must
No,
have
it
had to
was
be quite
all
hard wearing.
It was all
Okay.
silicone, but
Okay.
again, each take I'd put little lycra gloves on him, so he wouldn't. You put your hands in your pockets, you take them out again. You've got little bits of dirt and dust and hair, sticks. You'd be amazed at how dirty hands can get after 5 minutes.
And obviously you're having to deal with them wearing bowler hats or hats a lot of the time, which presumably adds to the sweat and everything. So how often were you sort of having to go reapplying all the makeup?
His skin was quite dry, so it didn't peel off much at all. It was a few times we had to go in and retouch, but generally it held up really well.
Yeah.
And it was quite heavy. It was a solid silicone face piece, a two-part piece, the neck, and then the face goes on over that. It was difficult, but we got it, nailed it in the end. So.
Obviously, this sort of is about a different era of Hollywood, and it is all about the movies as well. Films about a film, which I love. Did you do research on what they would have used at the time to make Laurel and Hardy look like they did on screen? Have you kind of ever spoken to anybody who was working, perhaps not right then, but sort of knew those older techniques and how have they?
Pan stick makeup.
Was that all it was?
Yeah, that was all it was. Yeah.
So is there any idea of like sort of recreating that using those same things?
No. Far too greasy, covering over the prosthetic.
How did John C. Reilly sort of cope with? How did he cope with having all of that sort of, and then having to act underneath it?
True professional.
Yeah.
Didn't complain once.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, he was great. And especially because we had the cool suit, which, that we had to have that. Otherwise, we could have been in trouble. But because he's pretty much wearing a sofa on him. It's a huge amount of couch foam that's fabricated by Joe Glover, one of Mark's crew members. He was great, and he just looked after the makeup. And he'd just go off outside of the set, sit down, we'd plug him in.
I love that image so much. Okay, let's move on to Vice, and let's show a clip of it, and then we can talk about it. So can you just tell us a little bit about what's happening in that scene in Vice and sort of where it comes in the timeline of Cheney's life?
That's in his 50s age look. So they're pretty much established at that point, but they haven't achieved, vice presidency yet. So
It's during the Reagan
yes.
time.
Well, actually, no, that's after. It's right around the
Christmas
time of
party?
Bush. Was it Reagan?
I thought it was.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused.
There are too many ages in the film. I mean,
But yeah,
that was
I
his
mean,
50s look.
you had
Trying to
so
keep
many
it.
ages.
yeah.
How did you have to like sort of, I know you spoke about from younger to older, it was quite a different look. But in those sort of interim, because we see so many years pass, so in those interim bits, were you literally just adding on tiny bits? Was it a completely different look each time?
There were 6 different full stages of prosthetic makeups
Right.
for him, and in this stage he was wearing 5 pieces, 2 nose, 2 cheeks, and a chin. So in some days we would have 2 and sometimes 3 changes in one day, and 3 pretty much. Christian never complained, but because of the time in the chair, he was like, 3 might be pushing it. So we tried to get it down to about 2 a day. So.
What about?
But between the things, we would subtly do things like the wigs. Between the main stages, we'd either maybe darken or whiten the wig a little more, so it would be in between the stages, and we'd you know, a little more makeup in the folds and wrinkles and things very subtly. So we really wanted it to be smooth transitions between everything, and it was crazy.
The laser stipple in the later stages and things.
And Amy, she was all stipple makeup with a wattle, silicone wattle, because I had tried, in the beginning, I tried to do Lynn Cheney when she was about 60 or so, had a huge facelift. And she didn't even try to hide this here. I mean, it was just pulled. Oh, God. And there was no hair here at all. And kind of created that in the film. Kate Biscoe had put lifts on her and that. And I tried doing a prosthetic with the, you know, pulled, and it looked horrible. Looked like a burn makeup. So she has a very strong jaw, so I just gave up, and because of the time, I just gave up and did, luckily she stippled really well, old age stipple where you stretch the skin and powder it and release it and it creates wrinkles. She really wrinkled really well.
What a compliment.
Yeah, and so it was all stipple and it worked really well. And she was great. She was just like, do your worst. You know, she didn't care. A lot of times you do actresses in films and they freak.
Really?
When you do age makeups on them.
Oh, really?
Oh, they absolutely freak.
What, the
And
actress is more than
Beautiful
the actor?
Mind, Jennifer Connelly, we did this makeup on her, and by the time she got to set, she had removed all the age spots. You know, and we were all, you know, you have to, it's hard, but like Amy is just like, do it, you know, go for it.
And you'd appreciate this. As we did her up as Lynn Cheney, numerous times she would be in the chair singing Bohemian Rhapsody as Lynn Cheney.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing.
Please tell me you got some video of that. Tell me that's floating around somewhere. Do you, apart from that, are there any differences with doing prosthetics for a man or a woman? Do you have to approach it any differently?
Well, I think doing a woman is much harder than a male.
Why?
When I did Benjamin Button,
Oh, God.
I really wanted Kate to be incredible, you know, and it's very hard because you have to be much subtler and it's just all different. And, you know, I've done a lot of men and it's easy, but women are very hard. And I was really happy in that film that Kate, I thought, looked fantastic in it, you know, it worked really well. So it's the hardest thing to do. Don't you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Women's
Yeah.
harder.
You know.
That's so interesting. So you just spoke about a technique that you tried and it didn't work. Have any of you others had that sort of testing things out, really sure it's going to work, and then just having to recreate?
Yeah, I think probably all of us have. I mean, yeah, that's why you do the tests, you know, and I think definitely if you've got a timeline or a story to tell, if you find the end result, you have to know how far the actor wants to go, the director, the producer, and sometimes you can, you know, just push it a bit and they go, but that's what it's for, so it's good, isn't it? That's what you test,
Got to test.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to open it up to the audience now. So if you have any questions for our panel, please put your hand up and we have roving mics that will come to you. Yes, we've got lady this row. Thank you.
This is kind of for everyone, but how much artistic license did you get? Did you ever think, well, because it's all based on a true story, did you ever think, I need to stop now because it's kind of not becoming kind of real? Did you ever feel that, how far could you go?
Yeah, most days
It's
Well,
like your
I
director
think
pushed you more.
when you're doing famous people or whatever, you have to, like Lois Burwell said when she did Lincoln with Spielberg, at some point you have to stop looking at the actual photographs and you've just got to use your imagination and get it close, because you'll never get it exact. And you just got to, you know, take a lot of license in doing it and doing what's right and getting it to where you know, it
Yeah,
works as a makeup.
It's getting the essence, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
especially if
the
you're
essence.
doing looking
Finding that
like it. I mean,
balance.
if
Yep.
you tried to make someone look exactly the same, I think you can't. So
You're setting
Yeah.
it's
yourself up to
what
fail.
is it that all of a sudden, you know, and then you've got to let your actors do the rest, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely done makeups where I've pulled back a bit and then you think the actor's going to take it further and they don't, and you think, right, I've got to do a bit more now then, you know. So yeah, and then some actors, I mean, in the case of Rami, I did what I thought was enough, and he just went away with it, and you know, that was it. It's great, you know. I didn't need to do any more.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you have any more questions?
Hi, my question is similar. It was about kind of your artistic license and whether you've got to use that to kind of bring out elements of the character of the story. I know, Nadia, you talked about the kind of the Queen's makeup being quite naive and childish. Were there any other kind of examples where you thought, we're not actually trying to recreate that look, we're trying to tell something about the character?
I think for mine it was because a lot of my characters aren't, I mean, the Queen Anne is probably the most recognisable, and lots of the other characters we didn't need to stick rigidly to the pictures. And it's a very character-driven piece. So again, like Jan was saying, we were doing our tests and then waiting to see what these actors were going to do with it. But because of the kind of free rein I had, there was lots of opportunity to do that and kind of, with how far the Queen could go with makeups or how far we could go with Emma's party, for example, Abigail's party in it. We went really heavy with the makeup. There's something actually quite scary about it. She has a fire eater, and as the fire comes up, it flashes up into this white face. And that was something that I thought at that point, the characters, there's something quite scary about her. Is she bad for the Queen? And so, you know, moments like that with makeup, you really can kind of do something for the character, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from our audience? I have a question actually about in terms of paring it back. So obviously, in certain examples, you have, like you say, the lesser known characters, or perhaps, like for example, Emma Stone. At the beginning, she's supposed to be very like sort of pale and very like, you know, an ingenue and all the rest of it. So do you have like a preference in terms of really sort of piling on as much as possible, going big, or paring it back and sort of making it look like she's not wearing anything?
It was always more fun when we could, you know, go do a crazy wig or makeup, but it really always is about the character and where they are at that moment. And it was quite scary to pare the women back so much and to strip that back, because they really had no makeup on, and you know, he would test to see if they got it on.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
You come out with like a little cleansing wipe or something.
Emma had just some concealer on under her eyes one day, and he spotted it. I mean, he was like, "She looks too good. What's going on?" And I was like, "Take it off." So, and that's pretty scary, because when you see that, you do see imperfection. They're beautiful women, but you know, everyone needs a little bit of help, and so that's quite scary. But for this film in particular, it's right for it. You know, that's how it would have been, and so there was a kind of joy in both, really, in be able to go really big, dress up these kind of peacock men, and then strip back the women. It was a joy in both.
Josh, in terms of working with director John S. Baird for this, how involved did he get? Was he as sort of as hands-on as your girl sounds like he was, or?
Yeah, he's really into it. He loved it from day one, from when we did the makeup test. It was pretty much locked down then. He was, very, very involved in that. But yeah, we did our initial test with the first stage makeup, the 1930s look, and that was approved. So from that point there, I just took the sculpt a lot bigger to the 50s look, and he approved that, and it was great. He was always on our side. So, yeah.
I thought Steve Coogan.
Yeah.
I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah,
And it was very subtle, subtle makeup.
We had more pieces for him, but he didn't want to wear them.
But
he didn't think
was
he needed
just
them.
brilliant
Yeah,
in that.
yeah.
Did he have ears,
He had ears, he had the chin. We made them, Mark sculpted all those appliances for him. Jerry Wood had applied them. He had a nose as well, which did push him a little bit more into the realms of Stan Laurel, but you didn't really need it. But for us as makeup, it looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
But we decided, he didn't need it. He didn't want it. So, he thought that as soon as the chin was on, he needed the chin. The chin really helped him with his performance. So, and the ears just gave it a little.
Yeah, I love that you're sticking out from under the hat. You obviously talked about how Christian had a lot of ideas for transforming into Dick Cheney. Is that quite common with the actors that you've worked with?
Sometimes they don't care.
Oh, really?
And you just have to work with yourself, but it's great when the actor will work with you and help you, because they'll see things that you don't see.
Okay,
you know?
like what, for example?
Well, just like him being fatter, I just thought it was going to be too fat, but it was perfect. It worked out great, and that, and Christian saw that. He was really concerned about the neck. That was the one thing he just kept. He wanted a very strong neck, thick, heavy neck in it, and that. Even though he really wanted Cheney to be in the background where you wouldn't notice him in a crowd or anything, it was very important to him. And it's the little things. When you do the tests and that, you've got to really know makeup, because I had gone in close to his mouth with the cheek pieces at one point, because Christian right here just sinks in so deep, and but it crinkled up around the mouth and didn't look good, so I had to take it back another 1/4 of an inch just from there to get the mouth to work right. It's all these little things you gotta fix.
Dick Cheney had a very specific way of the set of his jaw, and Christian would sit in the mirror when we were doing the makeup for hours and just giving that look. And it was funny when he would come to the trailer, because he had a lovely Welsh accent, but when he would sit in the chair, and as we were doing his makeup, it would slowly disappear, and he'd start sounding more American until the end, and he's got this quiet Cheney thing going on. And it was just fun to watch him. And when we made his teeth, we made several different sets, and he was like, well, maybe we could push the lip out a little more with the teeth to help with the pieces and things. And he was very hands-on with the look.
It was his idea for the nose plumpers, wasn't it?
He wanted to flare his nostrils, and I had done a show where we had done nose plugs for cavemen. And I was, we did this technique, and if you'd like to try it, we'd do it. And he loved it, but he was like, I don't think they're big enough. So we made about a dozen different sizes. And I think in the left nostril, it was size number 4, and the right, it was size number 6, and just to get it just right. And it was
At the end of the day, he'd sit down and just sit there and pull these huge things out of his nose.
We have numerous photos of him adjusting the plugs, and it looks like Dick Cheney's picking his nose.
Oh, brilliant. Hope they're in circulation. How do you work with the costume department? Because obviously, like you keep talking about the neck, and Dick Cheney wears a lot of high shirts with ties and everything, and he's almost like spilling out of the top of them. So is that a consideration in terms of, trying not to ruin the prosthetics as much as anything else?
Yeah, and he wore fat suits throughout the film. This woman in LA, she does these beautiful fat suits, and very expensive, but they're really amazing. So they all move and everything, and yeah, that was a concern. In fact, when we did the film, we did the appliances, and it looked really good. And the first day we shot out on the fishing scenes, when he was about, what, 70?
70s. Yeah, 70s.
And we noticed then the back of his neck, it just didn't work at all, because there was now so much here, and it just kind of stopped. So right then we put on the appliances and took them all to the back of his neck, and then did a whole big back of his neck with the rolls in it and everything to make it all work,
In fact, he had put on weight. So when we saw the clip in his 50s, that was actually his body without it.
Oh, really?
When he played younger, he wore Spanx to suck it in, and then from 60 on, he had a fat suit. So he liked the 50s and 40s age, because then he didn't have to wear anything.
I really love the idea of Christian Bale in Spanx. That's one of my favourite
too.
images.
He was always in the Spanx today.
Is there one particular sort of prosthetic or something that actors find really difficult to just get on board with, or they kind of maybe fiddle with quite a lot, or I can imagine it's quite irritant sometimes to have those, like a chin, which you forget
Well,
about.
the hardest makeup I've ever done was Sigourney Weaver in Alien 3. She had shaved her head down, you know, with the stubble. And she called me up one day. I'd done something similar in Hook with Dustin Hoffman. And she goes, they want me to reshoot the ending of the film. And she grew her hair back. She had really thick hair, and it was winter. And she goes, I don't want to shave my head. Can we do a bald cap with the stubble? And I just went, I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever done it before. And we made a foam bald cap. And it took me an hour and a half just to get her hair down with gaff quad and everything to just lay it as flat as I could get it. And then we had a foam bald cap, and Stuart Artingstall punched in each hair every day for 10 hours a day, 12 days. He would punch each hair into the head, and then I'd go and shave it with a shaver down to the stubble, and then I'd have to accent it with black stipple sponge and some color, and trying to line that thing up because it was so thin right in the front, and trying to get it on her and crammed with all that hair and line it up here, it was just the worst. I mean, and I said, I'll never do this again. Ever ask me. And they asked me 2 more times.
Did you say yes?
I did. And I said, but it's going to cost you.
Good.
And the studio's money's no object. So
That's always nice to hear.
yeah.
But pickups on films are always a nightmare, aren't they? Because your actor has gone on to
Yeah,
do
do
something
other
else,
roles,
and
yeah.
you know he's either grown a beard or and so.
Well,
you
Henry
know,
Cavill's
the
famous
pickups-
moustache.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
pickups are the tricky ones.
Yeah. Has anybody else got a question? Yes, just here.
Sort of referencing to that, how do you cope with the chronology of a film with regards to continuity, especially with the aging? Do you ever put it back and think, oh no, that's not right. I can't remember what he looked like at 55 or he looks 58, or do you ever find that? You know, you put something on, you think it's going to be the same, it doesn't quite work.
That shouldn't happen, should it?
Notes, lots of notes and photos.
I do very extreme notes
Yeah.
on each makeup, and we take a lot of photographs. And, you know, just matching up age spots every day is such a hassle. When I first watch a movie like Vice, I don't see the movie. I just staring at the makeup, and I looked every scene. I looked at his hands to see the age spots, if you can see them, and that they match. And I just concentrate on that. I have to see it a second time to enjoy the movie, but lots of pictures, and we do extreme notes on every color and where the age spots are and how many. And yeah, you have to. I remember doing The Howling with Rob Bottin, and I designed and did Eddie Quist's makeup, where he's got like the bullet holes in him and all that. And a year later, they reshot a scene in a porn booth or something. And I just went, oh my God, what did I do? And I couldn't remember anything, base color, nothing. And from that point on is when I learned to start doing really elaborate notes.
And you could do face mapping.
And in
things,
Titanic, I did
Yeah.
Gloria Stewart, and that was a very difficult stipple makeup. And then 1 year later, we reshot the whole ending.
Oh, God.
And you got the notes.
But your continuity breakdown, I mean, before you start shooting, you've got the whole film broken down, so in theory, wherever they go, you know exactly what your artist looks like. And then once you've established that point and you've got all your referencing and your photographs and you've drawn maps if you've got particular cuts or scars, then you should have your reference points.
And that's as much of part of our job as the
breaking the
application,
script
isn't it? I mean,
down, doing the
that's
continuity,
every job. I don't know about you, I've never shot anything chronologically.
And I break down all the artist continuity and give it to my assistants because that's the only way I get the whole film in my head. And then I can walk on set one day and go, should their wig be like that?
Yeah, I do the same, or otherwise it just won't sink in
Yes,
unless I
exactly.
break them all down.
Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you again to Lancome for supporting this hair and makeup masterclass, and thank you again to our wonderful panel. Good luck for tomorrow night as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.